In August of 2025, I wrapped up one of the hardest paintings I've ever done, an oceanic mural for my then soon-to-be-born daughter. This project was difficult, way more difficult than what I was anticipating. But the countless hours of work put in and the overall completion of the finished project was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. This is the story of how I made it.
Hi, my name is Jeff, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Studio Markworth. As of the time making this video, it is March of 2026. Where has my life gone? And today we're talking about a project that I dedicated over 2 months of my life to, an oceanic mural for my then soon-to-be-born daughter. She's here now, born in September of 2025, and she's healthy, beautiful, and she keeps my lovely wife and I both joyful and alert. Constantly. In June of 2025, I started on my first ever mural, and to be honest with you, I had no idea how to start and where to finish. I improvised the whole time with the process, and after looking at the footage and thinking back on the work that I put in, there are definitely some things that I would do differently. Material choices, additional process steps, paint application methods, etc., etc. Other than those few gripes, I'm fairly happy with what I was able to complete within that 2-month time period, and I look forward to further explain my process to you. You might have questions for me on why oceanic, or how did I get the idea for the mural? Well...
Babe?
Yeah, babe.
Would you want to paint a mural for the baby's room?
Yeah, definitely. I was planning on painting something, and I was just about to ask you myself. I even have a bunch of ideas.
You do? That sounds great. What are they?
Well, for a theme, I'm thinking...
Warhammer 40k.
We do a big battle scene with Space Marines, naturally, versus orcs. No. We'll do Space Marines versus Tyranids. No. We'll do Space Marines versus...
The Demons of Chaos.
Yeah. That works. Well, what do you think?
No.
Oh, I know. What would you really want?
I want an ocean theme with whales, dolphins, fish, jellyfish, and coral. Well, what do you think?
Tell you what, babe. That sounds perfect. I'll start right on it. And so I got right on it. Before drawing anything, I need inspiration. I need to look at artists who are way better than me to help give me the motivation I need for my creativity. Looking at great art gives me ideas on how to approach a project or a specific technique. I love specifically looking at art books beforehand as much as I can because it provides a wider breadth of an artist's catalog over doing a simple Google search. I have a fair bit of art books in my collection, but the most influential artists that inspired me for the mural are Mobius, Jeff Darrow, Hayao Miyazaki, particularly his work on Ponyo, and Katsuhiro Otomo. The big takeaways from these artists that influence my own work is their use of line, composition, and color. Their work is hyper-detailed with a chaotic number of subjects dealing in fantasy and narrative. Once I was inspired by greatness, the next important thing I do is gather reference. References as an artist are important because I have to know what I am drawing. I can't just make it up on the spot. I wish I had a photographic memory, but I am not the late great Kim Jong-ji. Okay, now that I've gotten inspired by artists and fish, I just draw. I typically start my drawings with thumbnails. In a way, I just start drawing different subjects from different angles and perspectives, and I build the composition out of those drawings into something that cohesively works visually best for me. As far as a goal for this painting, I wanted to fit in as much sea life as I possibly could within the composition, but I wanted it to fit within a slight visual narrative. The main focus are the whales, mother and child, swimming in a big ocean. There are friends and foes around, but Mama is there to protect. The theme is loose, but it helps drive a small bit of nuance throughout the piece. Photoshop is my main tool when it comes to drawing. It is easy to use, and I have a strong understanding of painting within the program. I drew everything on a Wacom Cintiq. It took me about a week to a week and a half of going back and forth with experimenting with the placement of forms, along with experimenting with color to get done with the mural's composition. Now, time for a breakdown. The style that I worked in for the creation of this mural was clearline, which is heavily inspired by the artist that I mentioned earlier. I love the look that clearline gives. It is flat and open. However, it gives a feeling of three-dimensionality without having to add value to explain the form. From a formal artistic standpoint, I wanted to have a strong difference between foreground, middle ground, and background, in order to provide a somewhat hierarchical order to the chaos. The foreground consists of coral reef, jellyfish, and a plentiful number of colorful fish. The middle ground contains our central subjects, being the whales along with the friendly dolphins, and the background contains sharks, schools of fish, stingrays, rocks, and other visual noise. The primary element that separates each of these sections is the use of color, particularly line color and fill color. The whales, the main subjects, are the darkest color and the whole painting can outline in black, aka they are the big focal point. The coral reef and the jellyfish contain a variety of colors and are outlined in a deep blue. They're essentially secondary forms and in a way visual noise, but they're still fairly important with their purpose in the piece. While the dolphins and colorful fish are boldly colored and outlined in black, they are secondary to the whales, but their purpose is to guide viewers around the painting from spot to spot as directional arrows. The background, fish and rocks, are outlined in a dark and middle gray while filled with middle and light grays. The background's importance is due to its purpose in providing visual noise and directional devices to keep a viewer's eyes in the painting, constantly bouncing from point to point. Also, the use of light grays helps provide an illusion of atmospheric perspective with the flatness. Atmospheric perspective is a technique used in painting that creates the illusion of depth and distance. Also, as a side note, I had to include a few Easter eggs spread throughout the painting because I had to. My daughter will eventually understand the references later on in life. Donkey Kong, Nemo, Dory, Marlin, and Ponyo. So the composition is figured out, but one of the hardest parts of this whole project was figuring out how to transfer the drawing that I made on the computer to the wall. I had a tough time with this step because I knew the solution from the start, but I wanted to try anything that I could to make it easier to transfer because I'm crazy and I decided to make a drawing with hundreds of fish because of course I did. The easy way, or so I thought, would be to use a projector on the wall and do a trace over of the image. I got an old projector that I thought would do the trick, but that didn't work because the room itself is not deep, so the image on the projector cannot be blown up to proper size. I also tried an old school overhead projector that my supervisor at work let me borrow, but alas, that didn't work either. The image came out too small and the depth of the room, again, not deep enough. So, how did I manage to transfer the image from the screen to the wall? Well, I used the tried and true grid method. I split the reference image up into manageable squares that I would transfer over to 10-inch by 10-inch squares on the wall. I then printed out large reference sheets that I drew from square by square until the final image was transferred over. The drawing section of this project was possibly the hardest part of the whole mural for me. The physical act of drawing wasn't hard, more so just the time it took to keep track of all the fish that I included in the composition. Using the grid helped out tremendously. The grid was a major crutch for completing this massive puzzle of lines. I drew from box to box, and it definitely helped me figure out what went where. Once the pencils were finished, I did the whole drawing all over again, this time with the trusty black Posca pen. Think of it as a finalization of the drawing. This part went by way faster and honestly was the most fun that I had with this entire process. I really love black and white ink drawing, and in another reality, the clear line ink drawing wall would be the final version. But that's not quite how things worked out. In our journey for the completion of the mural, I was presented with a massive number of lines that created an inconceivable amount of fish. When I was at this point in the painting process, I really didn't know where to start. I then realized I needed to break everything down into sections from smallest to largest for the filling of the color. I primarily did this to simplify the image into its basic elements, while also getting a good amount of experience with the materials I was using. For the most part, I painted the fish and coral with Posca acrylic markers. The markers worked well for what they are, but if I were to make another mural in the future, I probably would not use Posca markers for the majority of the work. The markers could bleed if water touched the already laid down marks, and they could mix easily with other Posca paint on the surface, making mud and force me to put down multiple layers of paint. If I were to paint a mural again, I would probably just designate Posca markers specifically to line work and paint my color fills with standard acrylic or latex paint. Also, I painted with golden acrylic paints, Liquitex acrylic paints, and house paint. Wide variety of different paints used, but a good majority of the wall was painted with Posca markers. Okay, back to how I tackle filling in with color. I started with the small fish first, then the jellyfish, and finally the dolphins and background fish. After the fish, I did the coral and the background. The final section of the painting I did was the whales. My explanation for the filling in of the color is fairly brief because it was a monotonous process that took a massive amount of time. But overall, bouncing from part to part really gave me a sense of accomplishment as I completed each section. After filling each section in with color, I did have to go back over my lines to clean them up. It's not too difficult of a process to go back into the line, but it did add a bit more time to completion. In conclusion, this is probably the toughest painting that I've ever worked on up to this point in my life, purely because of the amount of time and effort I put into it. From a technical drawing standpoint, it wasn't too hard, it just took a heck of a long time to paint. This mural was a huge commitment, but in the end, it was worth creating for an even bigger commitment, my beautiful daughter. Daddy loves you, and to the audience, if you stuck around this long, thanks for watching, and goodbye. Yay, we're done.